One of the FT-70D's claims to fame is that it is easy to program repeaters and other channels via the radio's front panel. If you've seen my video intro to the FT-70D, you know that's true. This makes it particularly helpful when traveling and you have access to the Repeater Book smartphone app. When you have your smartphone's GPS turned on and grant the app access to location information, you'll get a list of known repeaters within the distance limit that you specify in the app. With just a few button presses, you'll be ready to go. Now, all that's great, but sometimes you'll want to plan a bit more or manage channels that you've collected and stored over time. With the huge number of channels in the FT-70D, trying to keep that straight using the keypad would be a nightmare. Enter CPS, or Customer Programming Software. Right now, you've got three choices. First is a CPS provided by Yaesu. The version for the FT-70D is ADMS 10, and it's freely downloadable from Yaesu's website. Yaesu builds great radios, but comes up a bit short on the programming software. Besides an odd radio connection process involving plugging and unplugging various cables, functions like importing directly from outside sources such as Repeater Book are missing. Your second choice is to purchase CPS software from RT Systems. This software is easy to use and to connect your radio. I've used it with an ICOM radio that I have. At $25 or so for the software, it's reasonably priced, but there is a but, however. Different radios require different cables, so you'll need to spend another $25 for cables unless you happen to have one already. Now, at $50, the price isn't quite as attractive, especially if you tend to set and forget your radio's settings. The third choice is CHIRP. CHIRP is an open source software that is also freely downloadable. It may take a while for new radios to show up in the list of supported radios because the programming is done by volunteers who are part of the open source community. The FT-70D has been around long enough and it's listed in the supported radios. Now, since I'm a frugal person, my plan was to go with the free Yaesu software. But after stumbling on a post about CHIRP working with the FT-70 radio, I decided to go with that. I'd used it on another one of my radios, so I already had some familiarity with it. As you'll see in a second, you can access all the radio settings, name, and select memory bands, and import repeaters and other channels from outside sources. The channel display looks a lot like an Excel spreadsheet, and you can manipulate the entries and do some cutting and pasting from various tabs to set your radio's channels up the way you want. If you're working with a bunch of channels, it may take a while to get things the way you want, but it's considerably easier than using the radio keypad. Now, this isn't a CHIRP tutorial. There are some good ones on YouTube, so if you haven't used CHIRP before, start with one of those. In the following video clip, we'll work through the radio connection process, review radio settings, import from Repeater Book, and set the radio's channel order and write back to the FT-70D. Before we jump into that, please click the thumbs up button below the video and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. Click the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. So, let's get started. When you think about programming your radio using the Customer Programming Software, or CPS, and in this case we're using the CHIRP software that goes beyond just the FT-70, you normally think of programming the memories. Easier to input using your keyboard on your computer, and as we'll see in a few minutes, you can also import memories from external sources, which is something you can't do directly from the programming software from Yaesu. But there's more to it than just that, and we're going to start by looking at that information. So first, you see that we're in the settings area for the radio, and there are several sub areas for that, and so we can look, and we're in the configuration phase, and so we've got the automatic power off. You can make changes there. If you leave the radio in your car, you know, and you're in and out during the course of the day, if you forget it, you know, it'll turn off based on the time there. I'm going to leave that as the off setting. Busy channel lockout. All these things are defined in the manual that comes with the radio, and so you just have to look for them there. You know what the beeps are. The busy LED is going to be on. The home reverse is set to reverse. These are defaults. I haven't messed with them. You can make changes from the radio's keypad, of course, and then the next time you upload your radio software, these will change in this file. And so if you make changes here, then you would upload it to the radio. And if you've made changes in the radio, then you upload it to the program, and those changes will keep things synchronized. So you can have the push-to-talk delay, RS, all of the things that you see here. The volume is set at volume level 12. It was the last setting I used. Mic gain is set at level 4. I'd gotten some feedback when I was using it that it was boosted a little bit, so I drove the mic gain down just a little bit. And then the squelch is at level 1. I can move into the digital areas, and so there are a handful of things related to digital operations that you'll see here. My call is there, so my call sign's there, Alpha 7 Juliet Mike. I have the AMS transmitter mode set to auto, so it'll detect what the signal it's receiving, and then the transmitter will output on that. The VW mode is off. Here are the digital ID numbers, and for the auto here, and for using wires X with the auto, we're going to leave those at zeros. But if you had your own group and you were trying to limit who's participating in that conversation, you could set digital IDs there, and that all again is explained in the owner's manual. Digital pop-ups pop up for 10 seconds, and standby beeps are off. In terms of the display, the lamp's going to stay lit for 5 seconds. It's going to dim to level 6, and the opening message mode is going to be a message. In the DTMS area, there are a number of DTMF choices. They are all listed here. In the group monitoring choices, there are a couple of group choices that you can make selections to. Again, these are the defaults. I'm not working with groups. And then here you can deal with the scanning choices that you can make. So those are the things in the various settings. Unfortunately, the banks and bank naming tabs in CHIRP as user-supported software don't work with the FT-70. The good news is that naming and assigning banks in the radio is fairly easy to do using the keypad. The downside of this is that some of those settings may not transfer if you move back and forth into CHIRP. So be mindful of that if you're planning on using a lot of different frequencies and a lot of different banks. And then last but not least is the memory, and we'll deal with the importing of the memory here in just a second. This is the end result of that. We'll take a step back in time with another little video clip of bringing all those memories in from an outside source. So this is the CHIRP. At this point, then you could save the file, save as. If you want to give it another name, it's going to save with the date. And if you wanted to give it something more communicative, you could rename it and save it as you wish. After saving it, then you would go back to the radio and you would upload to the radio. If you've kept your radio connected via the data cable, when you go to upload, as you'll see in the frequency demo here in a minute, that it'll all load in there very much the same way as it downloaded. So when we start with this, we start with the radio. You pick the radio that you want to download from. It came up. I've made the selection of Yaesu and the FT-70 and COM port 5, and then pressed OK. Now when we do this, it comes up with the instructions that we're going to use, and it's still kind of interesting in that you turn the radio on, connect the data terminal to the data port. It uses a mini USB that came with the radio. You unclip the battery to remove power, then you press and hold the AMS key and the power key while clipping the battery back in, which is kind of an interesting task with holding both those keys with your fingers and then trying to use your chin to push the battery back in, unless you have a helper who can do that for you. So it's still in that regard a little wonky, but less so than using the ADMS software. Now when the battery gets plugged back in, it says ADMS on the screen, just like it does when you've gone through the system setup for ADMS. And then you click OK here on these instructions down here, and then you press the band button on the radio. Now the thing I noticed the first time I tried it is that it didn't communicate with the radio. When I looked at the radio screen, I saw the little padlock below the words ADMS. And so what had happened was, while I was pressing and holding the power button, the radio translated that as locking the controls. And so if you're doing it and the radio doesn't talk to CHIRP, do a quick peek at the screen, and if the padlock is displayed, then just tap the power button, the padlock will go away, and then when you press OK and the band button, you'll get the download. Now I have already downloaded, so I'm going to close that and close this and open up the display that I have downloaded. So in this screen I've got 2 channels programmed that I've programmed from the front of the machine, and now it's just a matter of doing the programming using CHIRP like you would normally do. So in this case, I'm going to I've got a channel 2 here that's identified. I somehow skipped it when I did the programming, and so I'm going to delete that memory and shift the block up. It goes away, it comes back, and now I've got my local club repeater as number 2, and I've got my hotspot programmed as number 1. Now the other thing, as I mentioned, is you can get information from a data source, and so we're going to click on the query the data source. I want to go to repeater book. I'm going to make a political inquiry. That way I can choose by state or province. I'm going to take all of the counties here in Arizona. I'm going to take the 70 centimeter repeaters, and I'm going to click OK. And now I've got my 70 centimeter tab up here, and I can either copy all of this in, or I can make choices and copy it into the FT-70. So in this case, I am going to copy all of them in just as a demonstration for you, and there's a bunch of them here, 200 of them, and so shift click, I've highlighted them all. At this point I can edit copy. I can go back to my FT-70. I can go here to channel 3. I can paste and click OK. And as you can see, the repeaters that are not listed as being digital or DIG supported are not coming through. So I'm getting some errors every couple of entries, and this might take me a while. They're going through here several at a time, and now I'm down to 49, almost done, and then here I am. I've got all of these repeaters from the repeater book all logged into my memories here at the FT-70. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to repeater book. I'm going to take a look at these. I'm going to make a judgment as to whether or not I would ever use this particular repeater. I don't want all 200 of them listed. I could have either done that prior to importing into the FT-70 tab from repeater book, or I can do it afterwards. I'm going to do it afterwards. And so that's what I'm going to spend the next few minutes on doing. I'm going to do some housekeeping, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this. So now I've gone through and looked at all of those repeaters that came over with the repeater book import, and I've cut out a bunch of them. I've got like 30 left, and I think I'm probably going to cut down some more. But what I basically then did is click and shift click, and then got to edit copy, and copied all of these, and then I moved to my FT-70D, placed my cursor where I wanted to insert what I'd copied, and then did an edit paste. And then I went through and deleted some more, and then if you go down here to the bottom of the list, if you click on that number and hit properties, you get a screen where you can input the data directly. And I did that with some YSF repeaters that I got from a manual search of repeater book, and then entered that data. For some reason they didn't come through in that data transfer. So I just put the data in here, hit OK, and then so a couple of these repeaters that were added in that way. Now, the other thing I did then is I grouped them by area, except for these down here at the bottom that, you know, I'm not going to likely be at. There's just places that I have been to occasionally here in the state of Arizona. And then, so here again, if you click on that item and right click on it, then you can delete things, you can move them up or down. If you get them grouped together, so like there were a couple here in Cottonwood, I could shift click on all three, and then I can click and move all three of them up, and so you can do some arranging. It's a little tedious, but I've got them the way I want. So at this point I want to write these channels back to my radio. So I want to file and save as. I'm going to go up and I'm going to put this in my ham radio file for my FT-70, and it's given me a date and time here in an IMG file, and so that's fine. I'll use that. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to go and upload to radio. So that's my next step. I'm in COM5 Yaesu 70D. I've left this plugged in, but it is probably timed out. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to tell me to wait and get into the ADMS. It still is in ADMS. So on the display, so I'm going to press mode. Wait will appear and then click OK. So I'm going to press mode. It says wait and then OK. And as you can see, it's going through the cloning process. It's writing to the radio, and so it's writing in all of that information for all of the channels, even if it's, you know, zeros and nones and so forth. So I'm just going to wait for that. So now the write to the radio is complete. The radio is turned on. The screen has illuminated. And so I think I'm done. So at this point, I'm just going to go back to the radio. I'm going to turn it off and turn it back on without the data cable all connected. And I should have my channels there in the radio. So as you've seen, it's entirely possible to program the FT-70D via CHIRP. The radio connection process is a bit less wonky than the Yaesu software, and the connection was solid. Importing channels directly from the software is easier than downloading a CVS file from an outside source and then uploading it into the programming software, as you have to do with the Yaesu software. Best of all, it's free and it actually works. Please remember to click the thumbs up button below the video and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. Click the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. AA7JM here, and 73s.